Good morning, folks. We'll let just another minute to let folks filter in. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. I'm sure more people will join as we go along. But welcome, everybody. I am Jason Rupp. I'm the COO of Georgia Bio, and we're really happy to participate today with Life Science Nation on this introductory call of RESI South, which I think a lot of people may not have heard of RESI or just want a refresher if you have. So I'm going to just go ahead and turn it over to Dennis Ford. Dennis.
Well, thank you very much, Jason. And I'd like to introduce Karen Dio. Karen, you want to say hello?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Karen Dio. I'm the VP of Product at Life Science Nation. I'm very, very happy to be part of this session and to give you a little peek into what we do at LSN.
And with that, we'll take it away to the first slide. LSN, you might not know about us, but we're a small company of about 15 people, and we really have a lot of reach. Like, we've been in the industry for about 12 years, and we've been doing RESI conferences all around the world. I think this is our 46th or our 47th one coming up. But as you can see from the diagram in front of us, we have a lot more products than just the RESI products. And so when you think of who LSN is, Life Science Nation, and you think of our RESI conferences, Redefining Early Stage Investments, what you really want to think of is that the marketplace that we play in is the tech transfer offices give a license to researchers from academia, and when they get out, they're typically looking to affiliate with an accelerator or an incubator or a tech hub, and they're looking for SBIR grants and other non-diluted revenues to kind of get the technology up and running. And there comes a point in time when a startup entity, be it a drug and device, diagnostics, or digital health, we call it the 4Ds, where they say, hey, we need to start looking for our seed round up to 2 million, or our Series A 2 million to 10 million, or our Series B 10 million to 50 million. And when a startup company is at that particular juncture, that's when they fall on our radar screen here at Life Science Nation. And so we have been curating a database of 10 categories of investors for about 10 years. We have 5 full-time staff, and basically the staff will call up the investors. We have about 4,000 of them in our database, and do these one-on-one interviews every 6 to 9 months. So I have a saying, data comes in 2 states, out of date, very out of date. And so we have a database of 4,000 investors. And if you're one of the 4Ds in a startup company, in a couple of clicks, we can get you a list of all of the investors that we know from Asia to Europe to North America that are a fit for your stage of development and your product set. And we also have integrated that with Salesforce.com, because typically you get a list of 600, 800 startups, and then, investors, either capital investors and licensing partners. And then you have to put that list somewhere. And Salesforce.com is kind of like the CRM that most of the BD market and salespeople use. And you can buy a copy of it for a low monthly fee. And then when you have the investor target list in the Salesforce.com application, now you're actually get the infrastructure so that you can really organize and keep track of all the canvassing and all the meetings that you have. So that's the data part. And then we have this other thing over here, which is called Focus on Cures, and that's our accelerator. So we've developed 16 classes, and what we find is when we get the seed Series A or Series B folks, when they're coming out of the accelerators and incubators, they've all had these mentor coaches and entrepreneurs in residence. And they come to us with these, here's the problem, here's the solution, here's the addressable market. And they're really kind of cookie cutter, and they had to get there in the first place. So it's good that they have that when we see them. But the investors are telling us, we don't want to see cookie cutter. We want to know who the heck the CEO is, and who the heck the team is, and how did they find each other, and how do they deal with each other, and what happens when they pivot or they don't make a milestone. We want to hear all the good juicy stuff. And we also want to know about the technology. What was the magic that the founder and the team, how did they put it together? What are the elements that came into play to create this new technology? And so they basically say, Dennis, please tell your CEO network that what we are trying to do is they've got to make it easy for us to say yes to a meeting. And so because of that, we have instituted these 16 classes, which is 8 hours of curriculum, which really helps a fundraising CEO figure out how to get that compelling PowerPoint executive summary in one-page data. And then the last thing is, you got to get out of your region if you're going to raise money. And so you can't go to one conference a year. So we have 5 RESI partnering conferences, start in January at JPM, and then we're going to be in Atlanta in March 25th, and then we're going to go over to Barcelona, Spain, and then back to Boston in September, and then over to the PAC Rim, probably Singapore or Japan. And so if you're a fundraising CEO and you need to get out of the office and you need to get out of the region, it takes 9 to 18 months. It's pretty much a full-time job. And so we've created this open infrastructure that allows for you to get a list, get organized with the list, go to our conferences, meet investors, and that's what we'll be talking about today. So with that, I'll turn it over to Karen.
Okay. So we're just gonna talk about the RESI conference, give you guys a little bit more detail, since we know that's one of the big things that you came here to find out about. So of course, the main portion of the RESI conference is the partnering, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But the other big portion of our RESI conference is the content, because the entire point of the RESI conference is to help early stage companies move forward. And it's not just about the meetings with investors, it's also about giving you the information that you need to make for an efficient fundraise and to help you avoid pitfalls that are very common for early stage companies. So we have 3 main portions of the content. The first track is the investor panels. This is where we bring early stage investors to give information about what they're looking for, where the industry is headed, what trends they're seeing, what to do, what not to do when approaching them. These are either divided into investor types, such as the pharma groups or corporate venture capital investors or family offices, or they'll be topic specific, like medical devices or mental and behavioral health. And so there's always going to be something for everyone. The middle 2 tracks, now that's the Innovators Pitch Challenge. And the reason this is a really great tool for companies is, one, if you're pitching, it's a great way to increase your exposure. And if you're an early stage company, it's a great way to go and learn about what other companies in your sector are, how they are pitching, how investors are responding to their pitches, what questions are they asking, what are they looking for. So it's a really great way to see what other companies in your sector are doing. And the last track is our workshop track. This is where we bring industry experts and service providers that can share their experience from what they've seen working in the industry. So this can be anything from service providers to lawyers to consultants, and they'll give you information on, how to avoid certain issues, how to, like, we have one where McDermott, Will, and Emery will do a session on negotiating term sheets, or or what to do when you need equipment but don't have the resources to spend, or other different areas that they can help with, and you can learn from their expertise in navigating this industry. And it's also a really good way to learn where your gaps are and where it might be useful to get a service provider to help you with that. So the partnering. This is, of course, the key to RESI. It's the main purpose of why we have companies come there. And as you can see, over 70% of the meetings that take place are between investors and companies. Now, this is where the 1-to-1 ratio of companies to investors really comes into play. And these investors, they keep coming back because they know that they can come to RESI to get good deal flow. So these are all investors in the early stages. That's one thing that we double check. That's also where the research team comes into play, vetting the investors, getting profiles that are going to be in the partnering platform so that you can learn ahead of time who's a fit for you and request meetings with investors who are a fit. The partnering room itself is really cool to see. It's a big room with all of the partnering tables. You can see all of the activity. And for any company that's pitching, you also get a poster, and we put that in the same room as the partnering tables. And this creates a great way for interaction, because the investors have to go through the area with the posters in order to get to the partnering tables. And so they can see all of this developing technology. And we've seen a lot of investors who will then drop business cards at the posters of the companies that they find very, very interesting in order to be able to follow up with them. And also, if you're not in a session, you're not pitching, and you're not in a meeting, standing at your poster is a great way to get good ad hoc meetings by pulling people, getting them to interact and explaining what you're doing. So that's also a really, really good way for companies to increase their exposure. Now, a little bit more information on the investor panels. Since Life Science Nation really focuses on being cross-sector, so we cover the drugs, devices, diagnostics, digital health, tools, and services. So we really try to make sure that there are a couple panels that are relevant to any sector. So that way you can always pick and choose the panels that you want to attend based on what your company is and what's a fit for you. And we'll rotate panels to give each conference a slightly different feel. And so you're not seeing the same topics over and over again if you're attending multiple events. Now, as an example for one of our panels, this is from our JP Morgan conference when we were doing a big pharma panel, but you can see here that we brought Amgen, Johnson & Johnson, AbbVie, Bayer. So we try to really bring the people that are at the forefront of the industry, people that can give a lot of information, that have a lot of experience, and that are really there and can share what they look for. So the big pharma panel is really of big pharma companies. These are all BD folks that are actively looking for early stage companies. And that's why it's a really good panel that's relevant for companies. Now, for the Innovators Pitch Challenge, it's not just about pitching to a panel of investors and getting feedback, although that is a very important part, but we make the additional effort to group companies by sector. So you can see here there was a diagnostic session, a therapeutic session, life science tools, clinical stage therapeutics, one focused on oncology. Now, this depends on the companies that are pitching in any given session, but we always divide the companies based on sector so that we can make sure that the panel of investors that is asking questions is relevant to all the companies, because we want to make sure that you are getting, that any company that is pitching is getting good questions and how they would expect an investor to really ask and approach a potential portfolio company to really make it a good experience. Now, we can't guarantee, of course, that an investment will come from that, but conversations have definitely been started and continued after that. And at the very least, it's a great way to get feedback on your pitch and on what resonates, what you may want to change. And each judge produces a sheet with written feedback for each company so that you can then go and collect them after the session and see what additional feedback they have to give you. And with that, I'll let Dennis continue to talk a little bit more about LSN and what we can do to help you.
Thank you very much, Karen. Really appreciated. And so, the difference between what LSN and RESI and the product suite that LSN has is that we're just focused on this really small niche, which is how do you prepare and how do you execute a global roadshow? And in order to be successful at a partnering conference like RESI, you really need to think through the process. And as we said, people come to us with the problem solution and the addressable market deck, which is fine, but it's really not what the investors are looking for. The investors that we have been talking with for 10 years, they're just saying it's like, we want to figure out who this company is, who the founder is, what the team's all about, how the technology, and we want to know the personal human dramas and aspects that are out there. And everybody else on the other side of the table, which is the startups, they think they just got to do a deep dive about the science, and so it just doesn't work that way. And I remember one time I was working with a really cool company that was working in the Alzheimer's space, and they had some pretty deep technology. And the CEO basically said, I've got my slide deck, and I just want to go into the meeting and just throw up my slide deck and just take over the meeting, control it, tell them about my science. And I said, let's do an experiment. Why don't you try that for the first half? I think he had like 16 meetings that day. In the first half, he had 8. And I said, try that for the first 8 and see how it goes. And then the second 8, just bring in 1 or 2 slides, have it in your back pocket, and just have a conversation with the investor. Tell them who you are and what you're doing, and see how that goes. And at the end of the day, the fundraising CEO came to me and he said, I'm in total shock. It's like I took over the meeting. I had no conversations, no mutual discussions. And when I just did the conversation, I found out all about their personal lives, where they went to school, where they were going in the industry, what their lineage and pedigree was. And we had a really meaningful conversation. So, that was a really hardcore techie PhD researcher in brain Alzheimer silo, and he was just convinced that it was all about the technology and wanted to tell all about it. And he didn't really understand that it's really, you need to have a fit, which is the investor has to have a mandate for your stage of development, if it's pre-clin, IND, phase 1, phase 2, whatever, and your product. And so we can put them in front of all the Alzheimer's investors and licensing partners. But then if he's just going to take over the meeting and just do a deep science thing, it doesn't really work. So, we very early on started saying we're trying to teach PhD scientist entrepreneurs how to sell, how to be marketers, how to be BD people, and they're coming out of these research environments, and so it's hard. And so we basically said what we really want to do is be able to put a compelling story together. And just a couple of examples. I was talking with this woman from Australia. We do these cohorts every year from Brisbane, Australia, and we get like 15 or 20 companies, and we say, okay, tell us about your story. And when I was talking to her, she kept on pushing back. She goes, why are you asking me about my history and my story? Like, what does that matter? I'm trying to talk about my technology. And I said, well, just tell me, like, how did you even get involved in science? Like, why are you a PhD CEO of a startup company in the virus space? And she said, okay, I'll tell you. And basically, she said that she's a mother. And when her son was a teenager, he got a really bad virus and wound up in the hospital for a couple of months on an IV drip. And she said, every day in the hospital, I just used to look at my son on this getting IV. And I said, if this kid can ever get out of here, I'm going to devote my life to trying to prevent this from other kids. And I'm going to go out and try and cure malaria. And I said to her, what a great story. Start every presentation with that kind of personal story. That's going to get people's attention, and it reveals so much about you as a person, your passion, your compassion, all of the good things that have happened. And so she went on and did it. And they recently came back from JPM where she did quite well. And she was actually selected by the country of Australia to be in this life science startup pitch competition for the whole country of Australia, and she won it. And she sent me an email and said, Dennis, I won the pitch competition for Australia, and it's because you pushed me to get that story. And I said, I didn't push you to do it. That's your story, and we pulled it out. But those are the kind of things that if you can think about what brings you to a certain point, and you can bring that human aspect, that personal aspect. Another one where I was talking with a woman one time, and she had a database of blood cancers. So everybody thinks there's, lymphoma and follicular, and there's like a half a dozen blood cancers, but there's about 250 of them. And I was asking her, so what's the genesis here? Like, where did this all start? Why are you creating a database of blood cancers? And she was just, kind of giving me these really surface answers. And I said, no, I really want to know more. And I kept on pushing back. And she said to me, she was Asian, and she said, you don't understand the Asian culture, Dennis. And I said, okay, tell me what I don't understand. And she said, when I was younger, in my teens, I got blood cancer, and they couldn't diagnose which blood cancer I had, and therefore couldn't treat me. And as the time went by in the hospital, I was getting sicker and sicker. And the reason is because they didn't know what cancer I had. They couldn't go in and put the symptoms in and come out with a diagnosis, and therefore give me the treatment. And I made a promise to myself that if I ever did that, survive this, that I was going to go fix that problem for other people. And I said, wow, what a great story. That's the thing you should lead with. Maybe not in where you're from in Asia, but in the North American investors would love to hear that story. And so she was saying, in my culture, we don't talk about troubles like we have in the family, or medical histories, or if something happens to you, you don't like bring that out in public. It's just not what we do. And so I said, point taken. But if somebody's going to be giving you money, and they're going to be spending a lot of time with you, they really need to be able to figure out who you are as a person, and what your own personal story is. And so that's what's been the driving force behind getting a compelling story together, which brings us right over to the next subject, which is your collateral. And so in the collateral world, we basically say you need a one-page data sheet, a two-page executive summary, and a 10 to 12-page PowerPoint. And we don't know the reason, and we'll go into it in a little bit. But some people like to read executive summaries, some like to read PowerPoints, and some like to do one-page data sheets. And Karen and I laugh at each other because she loves to do the deep dive into the PowerPoint, and I just want to read the story in the executive summary. And other people would say, just net it out for me. I want to see who's on the advisory board, who's the employees, what they get from SBIR. Just give me the list in a one pager and I'm happy. And so we basically have developed this process in how to design your collateral, which has to do with, getting a tagline straight, and getting an elevator pitch straight, and then leading with those and putting them into each of these other three modalities. But once you get your collateral done, and you get your story straight, and you get your collateral all in order, then you've got to go figure out, like, what's my target list look like for investors that are a fit for my stage of development and my product. And so I was helping a company recently. They have a $125 million digital health fund, and it's a famous family out of MIT, and they have a whole network of people that are related to them. And they basically are raising this fund, and they're about halfway done with the fund. And they came to me and said, we've got about 60, and we're trying to raise 125. We need to get at family offices. So we have a big family office network of about 400 family offices around the world. So we brought them to our JPM conference, and as part of the whole process, I said, give me your PowerPoint. Let me take a look at it. And when I looked at their PowerPoint, it basically said in 2023, they went through 800 companies in order to invest in 3. And at the same time, I was helping another company that has a theme of pediatric. They're looking for drugs, devices, diagnostics, and digital health that affect children. And that's their theme. And so I looked at their presentation, and in 2023, they went through 600 companies in order just to get the ones that they had invested in. And then at the JPM conference, we had a new investor from Germany, and they brought a bunch of people from Germany to JPM for a week. And they told me they identified and vetted 300 companies in a week. And so the investors that follow us around, they have like this big problem. They need to like get hundreds of companies. They need to see hundreds of companies in order to find the ones that they want to invest in. So they can travel to California and to Atlanta and in Boston and Barcelona and Asia Pac with us, and that will really help, solve their problem. On the other side of the coin, when we do searches for fundraising CEOs, we always come up with 800 companies that are a fit for their stage of development and product set. We have angels and angel syndicates and family offices and private equity and venture capital and med tech and pharma and strategic and corporate and endowments and foundations and patient groups. So we have like 10 categories of investors. And when we go do a search in our database for a particular company, we usually get around 800. And so it kind of struck me that, there's this 800 to 3 rule. If you're starting out and you're going to be raising money, if you don't have 800 targets, it's going to take 9 to 18 months. And after a year, if you haven't, talked to several hundred investors, you're not really playing the numbers game the way it needs to be played. And so, you get your story, you get your collateral, you get your target list. And then when you get 800 profiles of investors across the world, you've got to put that list into a CRM. And so we've done this thing into Salesforce, but you can download it into any other product you want. But one of the things in roadshow preparation that really, to me, is a game changer that not a lot of people understand is, if you're a fundraising CEO and you're running a company and you're doing your product development and your QA and you're running your service providers and you're writing your grants and you're doing all that stuff, and on the side you decide that you're also going to go raise money, it's really hard to do it. And if you don't have experience in BD, sales, marketing, and canvassing and all that stuff, it's a high hill to climb. So several years ago, we just said, we were hiring interns from laboratories in college that said, I've been working in labs, but I would much rather not do this. I'd rather get into BD. And we would just hire them, give them a phone and a desk, and have them interview investors after we trained them. And we found that it really worked well. And so we started recommending to our fundraising CEOs, I mean, you're all coming out of university, you have this wealth of resources there. Find a part-time BD person, that's someone that's coming out of a lab and wants to learn about what it's like to be in business of a startup. Hire them for 25 or 30 bucks an hour, 20 hours a week. And if you can give them the list of the global targets that you're going after, and you have the collateral, if you can find a person like that, that's a people person, that is skilled at social media, that likes to set up meetings and likes to interact with people, have that person set up the meetings for you. And then you just go to the meetings once they're set up. And you're not a CEO who really doesn't know how to do it, doesn't understand it, and is trying to, climb that hill from scratch. So what we've gone over here is like the preparation stuff. And then when you're executing, there's this whole other world, which we call, canvassing. And, when you go to a RESI conference, we've got this process that we've created where you basically will put an email together, and in the subject line of the email, you go first request : entry level, intro level meetings. And then a couple of days later, subject line, second request, more about the management team. And then the third request, more about the technology. And then the fourth and final request. If you send out 4 emails with those in the subject line, it's just a little nuance that we've learned, because we're we're professional people who canvas, you go from 5 to 7 meetings to like 12 to 20 meetings just by doing the follow-up. But a lot of people, they say, I don't want to bother anybody. I don't want to spam anybody. I don't want to look like I'm too over aggressive, because they don't really understand the world of canvassing and marketing and sales and how all that works. So, how do you execute? And then when you're going to road shows and partnering events, you've really got to, figure out, how do I net out my story so that if an investor is coming to RESI, let's say we have 200 coming in March 25th, and all of a sudden they're getting, the week before, they're getting hundreds of requests they have to go through. They're not going to read a big PowerPoint. They're going to skim everything they get. And when they skim, they're just looking for a reason to say yes. And so if you have a really tight tagline that basically elucidates who you are and what you're all about, it just makes it so much easier, because 5 to 7 words, they can just figure out, yeah, I want to meet this company, or they can read your elevator pitch in 5 to 7 sentences and go, yep, I got to meet these guys. These are things that they can scan. So if you're not familiar with how partnering events work and how investors get inundated with requests and what's your best strategy to stick out, well, you got to have a great story. It's got to be compelling. You've got to be able to put it in a really small window of 5 to 7 words in a tagline, so they could look at it and just go, yeah, I want to meet that guy. And then, the follow-up metrics. If you go to a conference, you're never going to get funded on the first meeting, because it takes 6 to 9 months for them to do due diligence in a lot of the times. So you have to do your metrics, like, how many people did I meet? How many people asked for a follow-up meeting? How many people wanted to do NDAs? How many people are doing referrals? And how many people don't want to follow up meetings? The ones that you get off the table are as important as the ones that you keep on the table. And so really starting to understand the metrics, and then the whole art of follow-up. How long do you wait? What's too short of a wait time? What's too long of a wait time? What's the perfect wait time? And then how do you get back? Putting it together as far as doing follow-up. And eventually you wind up with a short list of people that leads to a transaction. But this whole process is a learning curve that takes time. Karen, do you have any statements here?
I think that about covers it, and I'll be going into more detail about the branding and messaging later as well.
Okay, cool. Next slide. So I was alluding to it. Recently we talked to this gentleman from Alabama that had a contrast agent for vascular diagnostics, and using nanoparticles. And so basically we talked, and I said, what's your tagline? And he kind of came in with a slogan, which people do. And you got to really watch out, like, revolutionizing diagnostics, or, solving the global problems of hard tumors. You can't have these slogans or these really wide, gigantic things. And his thing was nanoparticles for vascular diagnostics, a new nanoparticle contrast agent for vascular diagnostics. And if you just look at those 5 or 6 words in a tagline, that just basically says who this guy is. And he's got nanoparticle technology that's a diagnostic that is improving the vascular imaging. And if you go into his elevator pitch, there's a couple of things that are really interesting: that it clears the body quicker, it gives better imaging contrast, it's ion based, and it fits well in this T1 environment, which is kind of like the industry standard. And so we were talking to him, and we got him down to this tagline, and then we got him down to the elevator pitch with the 5 things that that he's got: a disruptive product in the contrast agent market that's a diagnostic, and that's like really great. And so getting him there to do that tagline and elevator pitch. And then when he does his 1-page executive summary or his 1-page data sheet, he leads with the tagline and the elevator pitch and then does all the other stuff. And then the same with the 2-page executive summary and the same with the 12-page PowerPoint. You put the tagline and elevator pitch, right up in front. What does that do? That means if a person is going to open one of these documents, they're going to immediately see the tagline and the elevator pitch, and they're going to be able to decide whether they want to meet with the person or not. And if you do that, the investors say, make it easy for us to say yes to a meeting, but they also appreciate the fact that you've done it, that you've netted it out so that they can just read something really quickly that you've put together and they can decide to meet you or not. And it just shows that you're on top of the game. Next slide, please. So what we found out in talking to, thousands of investors is that some investors will look at the slide deck. Some investors will prefer the one-pagers and some will prefer the executive summary. It's almost like a third, and a third. And so what happens is people don't know that. And so somebody coming out, a first-time CEO just says, I've got a deck, I'll send them a deck and it's 20 or 30 pages. And they think that that's okay. And it really isn't. And it disturbs a lot of the people when that's what they get. And so they don't have a meeting with you. And so one of the things that we came out with, and once again, this is the nuts and bolts and the blocking of the tackling of like, how do you get meetings with investors? And we basically said, if you can get those three pieces of marketing collateral and you put your tagline and elevator pitch on the front of them, and then when you're doing a request for somebody, you basically say, hi, I read your profile. You're an LSN partner. This looks really good. We're a fit because of this, this, and this. And if you'd like to see the collateral, here's a link to my one-pager. Here's a link to my two-pager. Here's a link to my PowerPoint. So now you've given the investor the ability to click on the one that they want to see. Some prefer just to look at the one page, or others want to do a deep dive and look at the PowerPoint. But you've given them a choice, and you've made it really adroit and easy for them to go find what they're looking for. And as a result, they really appreciate it. I think that's it. Next slide. So we went over the different types of investors, but here's an interesting scenario. I was talking with someone recently, and they said VCs aren't investing. And when I hear that, I kind of go, VCs aren't investing. That's not true. And they say, no, I've met them. And I said, okay, who did you meet with? And this would be someone that is preclinical therapeutic. And they said, I was talking with Atlas. So I'm like, Atlas is mid-stage to late stage. So that's not a fit. Who else? I talked to Polaris, late stage. That's not a fit. And so they don't understand that VCs come in these different flavors. Some are early stage, and an early stage venture capital and private equity theme is take little amounts of money and put it in many companies. So let's put 500 to 2 million in 10 companies or 20 companies. And if one or two of those companies make it, then we win. So that's the theme of an early stage VC and private equity company. If you're a mid stage, it's like when you get to phase 2B, call me, because you've de-risked yourself and you've got human data, and that's where we want to start to invest in you. And then the phase 3 guys who are later saying you've got phase 3 under control and you're going to go towards commercialization. We want to give you growth capital. We want to give you distribution capital. We want to write big checks so that you can go out and move this stuff into the marketplace. So those are the 3 different types. But most people who aren't in the world of investors and licensing partners, they don't really understand that. And so investors are looking to expand their portfolio based on their theme, and their theme is either based on a particular mandate or they're an opportunistic investor. And the licensing partners are trying to augment their product pipeline. So those are the things that we're talking about, but you really have to understand there's family offices and angels and 3 different types of VCs, and there's foundations and venture philanthropy. One of the things that's interesting is the American Cancer Foundation just did a new startup, 150 million, called Bright Edge. and they're looking for early stage oncology companies. And they just kind of spun up, and we met them at JPM recently in January, and we sent them like a whole bunch of early stage cancer companies, and they're really happy to talk to them. So you got to understand all the different categories, then where you fit in all those categories. And I think that's about it for me, Karen.
I'll unmute myself first before I start talking. Just to let you know, we did get a question in asking about why Atlanta. And the big thing for us is that we know that the Southeast region is an underserved market. There is a lot of really, really good technology. And we want to make investors aware of the technology that's outside the major hubs of Boston and San Francisco. That's why we also go to Europe and why we also go to Asia, because there's a lot of really cool companies that need investment, and that the reason that investors, what they gain is they gain good deal flow. Investors want to invest in the best companies, and they need to see these technologies from places outside of the hubs in order to get the best investments for them.
Yeah.
That's what they gain.
Yeah, and I've really learned a lot from my time in the South. Basically, if you look at the hubs like San Francisco and Boston, they basically got industry, government, and academia communicating with each other, and they've been doing it for a decade. And so there's this kind of like really fluid momentum in how do you get technologies out of the universities? How do you get them into incubators? How does the government give them money, whether regional or national, like NIH? And so when I was traveling around and met Maria and Jason, and they were telling me about what's going on at Georgia Tech, and I went down and did a boot camp with a bunch of really cool companies that Maria helped me with. We just met like some really cool companies that we know our investors would want to meet. And then we went down to South Carolina recently, and the exact same thing. Universities giving tech transfer licenses to really cool technology startups that are getting out in there now looking for partners. And so Maria basically came up with the idea of like, let's put the 7 states together from North Carolina all the way down to Florida. And then let's call that a hub. And then let's get global investors once a year to come, and we'll showcase all these companies. And so this is our first year doing it. And, we're going to come back every year and we're going to build this thing, but we're launching it the first year. And so everybody's going like, who's RESI? What's LSN? Do they really bring investors? It's too much to do this. And we're going through all of the trials and tribulations it takes to launch something like this. But I know in my heart of hearts, from going through, Alabama and Tennessee and North Carolina and Florida, there is a ton of really cool companies, because it's the golden age of life science. The AI tools and the other tools that are around are just making things better, faster, cheaper, quicker. And so this is going to wind up being a pocket in the United States where all the international and national investors are going to want to go to seek technology assets.
Yeah. And in terms of what pitching startups can expect to gain, it's increased exposure, both in our newsletter, in the program guide, at the event, a connection with the investors on the panel, because we end up connecting you to the investors afterwards. You'll get exposure at the conference, and you'll get valuable experience and feedback in the pitch itself, because all of these things are evolving, and you're going to need to do multiple rounds of pitching, getting feedback, seeing what resonates, what doesn't. So it's a really, really good experience. And we have one of our frequent RESI attendees, and he's been coming to RESI pretty much since the beginning. He's had 17 companies and like 8 unicorns. He still pitches at RESI because he still finds it a valuable tool. So it's not even just for beginners. Even people who've been in this industry for a very long time find this to be very, very useful.
Yeah, and just to wrap up, Paul, what am I expecting to get out of it? So we've created this open platform where we have 5 RESI conferences around the world every couple of months. And so one of the big problems that is for a small company in a region that's underserved is you got to get the heck out of your region. And then when you go, how do you get out of your region? So part of my thought is, if I can bring a RESI conference to the South, and I can you can get a $600 ticket to RESI, which means you can go look at everything, see what everybody else is doing. You don't have to pitch, you don't have to join partnering. You can just kind of go and see what it's all about. And then the next RESI in Barcelona, or the next one in January or September, you can go to, or you can wait a year and go to this one, because we'll be back again. But you need to be able to get out of your region, get into a investor partnering event that you can repeat 5 times in a year. So if you meet 15 or 20 investors at one conference, and then you multiply that times 5, you met with 70 or 100 investors. At the end of a year, you'll be able to say, where am I at? What have I learned? I've got some people that are really interested. I've got some people that are somewhat interested. You'll be able to take stock of where you are. And so we wanted to solve a problem in that if you're in a region that's underserved, you need to be able to have a strategy to get out of your region. So we thought that our product set of having a database of investors integrated with a CRM, and then bring RESI to the South, that would be the gateway to bring investors into your domain and bring your technology assets out of your region into the international market that we play in.
Yeah, and in terms of how many investors across how many areas of interest, we anticipate about 300 investors participating during the course of the event, and they'll be all across the sector. So we covered drugs, devices, diagnostics, digital health, tools, and services. Most of these investors will invest in more than one sector, so there will be some crossover. Most companies can find between 50 and 100 targets of people that they can reach out to ask to book a meeting at these conferences.
But that's a great question, Paul. Thank you. And we've got about 14 minutes left.
Yes. So I'm gonna
So
start
this one
talking.
isn't my fault.
Okay, so just to do a quick cover of branding and messaging. Now, one thing that's especially important, especially if you are a scientist who's becoming an entrepreneur. So I was actually a scientist for over a decade, in the lab doing research. And one of the things that I know is that we are always taught all the jargon to speak as complicated as possible when we're explaining what we're doing. Now, as an entrepreneur, you kind of have to unlearn that. And, for me, that experience was really highlighted by, my own family, where I'm the black sheep of my family. I'm the sole biomedical engineer in a family of electrical engineers, which means that whenever I tried to explain my research to my family, I had to take a step back and say, okay, I can't use jargon. How do I explain what I'm doing, the core of it, and what makes it unique in a way that my family can understand it, so that they can be a part of what I do on a daily basis, and they can share, and I can share things with them, and share my enthusiasm for what I'm doing. And that's kind of how you need to approach it when you're starting a fundraise, because you can't assume that the person that you're talking to has a scientific background. In fact, a lot of them have finance backgrounds. So you can assume that they'll know the basics of biology, and they'll be well versed enough to understand the concepts of what you're doing, but you can't do the deep dive into the jargon that you would normally do if you're in a scientific conference. So your initial conversations with those gatekeepers, those are generally associates that are responsible for deal flow. And those will have to be general conversations, just high level. All of these things are about getting that first meeting, getting them to say yes to get to the next meeting. And then in the next meetings, you get a little bit more detailed until the next meeting, and so on and so forth. So you'll get increasingly technical through the navigator, which is the next step, where you start to get into more of the science, until you get to the evaluator, which is where you do the deep dive into the due diligence on the scientific portion of it. And that's where you'll get deep into the science. You'll probably be talking to someone who has a PhD, and you can go into as much jargon as you want. They'll understand it, but you want to make sure you wait until you get to that level. And then, of course, at the end with the decision maker, then that goes back up a level in terms of not going into the deep science, then you're talking about the market, the competition, regulatory reimbursement, if it's relevant, all of those other components, because they're not just investing in a technology, they're investing in a company, and it's a lot more than just the science. Now, in terms of putting together your marketing collateral, you're going to start with a logo. And you can use the logo to try and impart and give an idea of what your company does. For example, LinkedIn Bioscience, it was an antibody technology. Riley Pharmaceuticals was doing something with back pain. Terra Bioworks was doing something with synthetic biology. And so with the genome. So you can see here that the stylized logos reflect what the company does. But more than that, you can see there that the tagline is with the logo. And that is definitely something that you want to do and make sure to put on your business card, because when you're going to an event like RESI or JPM or any other networking event, a lot of times these investors are meeting hundreds and hundreds of people and getting hundreds and hundreds of business cards. And so you want to make sure that when they're going back the week after and flipping through their business cards, they'll be able to say, oh yeah, I remember talking to this guy. I remember what they did. I need to contact them and follow up with them because I was really interested in continuing the conversation. If you just have a logo, your company name, and your name, they're not guaranteed to remember exactly what it is you do. But if you have a compelling...
We are running out of time quickly, so we got to move.
Okay, we will
And
move.
just one quick thing. If anybody has a tagline or an elevator pitch, or anybody has documentation of PowerPoint executive summary, you can send it to me. You can send it to Karen. Cam's here, our BD guy. So we call us. We will look at anything. We'll take the time and give you some advice. So please be able to do that.
And you can send it to me as well, jrupp@gabio.org, and I can get it over if you don't have their emails.
Okay, Karen, you're in fourth gear and pedal to the metal.
Okay, so as Dennis talked about a lot about the need for a compelling tagline, having your tagline on your logo is not going to help if it's just a slogan. So you really need to make sure that it's compelling, like autonomous, flexible robotic platform for cancer intervention. That may not sound sexy, but it gets the job done and it tells the investor exactly what it is you're doing. So that's what you're aiming for. Now, in terms of the elevator pitch, that will tell an investor who you are, what it is you're doing, what makes you unique, what stage of development you're at, what you're looking to raise, and what you're going to accomplish with that money. And it's just a paragraph. You need to be clear and concise about getting the message there. You don't need to go into too much detail on the science, but still enough detail so that they can understand. This will form the basis of your executive summary, your tear sheet, and your pitch deck, but it also serves as a great intro paragraph for when you're doing outreach, either at a conference or just your cold email outreach to investors. Your executive summary, this is where you highlight your story because it's in prose format. You can write it out. You can say how you got there, how your technology developed, why you're uniquely qualified to handle it. It's one way that companies look to express who they are, and a lot of investors like reading it there. Or conversely, you'll have your one-page tear sheet, which you take everything that's in your executive summary and you turn it into bullet form. And they can just scan it and see who you are, what the unmet need is, what the technology is, what milestones you've achieved, what funding you've achieved to date, intellectual property, who the management team is. It's all in one sheet that they can easily scan and get the keys for. My personal favorite, the pitch deck. I'm a very visual person, which is why I like this. And again, you'll be covering what's in your executive summary, and then you can choose a couple of slides to add to that about maybe going a little bit more deep into the technology or the competitive landscape or the product pipeline, whatever it may be. But make sure it's 10 to 12 slides. No investor wants to see a 60-slide deck. They're not going to look through it. We had a client who was tracking through DocSend how long investors were looking at his deck. The average was like 2 minutes. So they need to be able to scan through it quickly and be able to see, but it also needs to be standalone, which means that you need to be able to convey information visually without a lot of text that will still get a lot of information. Now, one of my favorites is this Gantt chart, because as you can see, it can be both from the past and telling people what they've done. So this is from a company that was doing the raise in the end of 2018. And so they showed what they'd achieved historically with how much money, what they're looking to achieve with their next fundraise, what milestones they'll hit, and when they'll hit them. And so again, this is really, really a good way to give a lot of information visually without a lot of text. And without a lot of space. And so using these tricks can help you in keep your pitch deck concise and convey a lot of information. Now, in terms of identifying information, the one takeaway I want you to take from this is do your research. Look at use a database of any kind, Crunchbase, PitchBook, Hours, whatever it may be. Get some information, look at their website, look at their portfolio companies, go to partnering events, see what they put in their profiles. If you can participate in person, that's preferable because ad hoc meetings are wonderful. But if you can't participate in person, participate digitally. Since COVID, pretty much every event has some sort of digital component, but you need to do your research to make sure that the investors you're reaching out to are a fit for you, because you don't want to waste their time. And more importantly, you don't want to waste your own time by meeting with investors who aren't even a fit for you.
Are we out of time?
We've got a few minutes left.
We got 5 minutes.
we go to-
I think if, yeah, we have about 5 minutes, but
I'm just wondering if we should open up for any questions or.
Yeah, we're pretty much done here. Just if you want to see the database in more detail, just reach out to us and we'll do a personalized demo. And we can definitely share a copy of Dennis's book on how to do a fundraise. You can download a PDF version of it for free. But with that, we'll open it up for any questions. And here is our contact information if you want to reach out to either Dennis or I.
any questions? Feel free to place them in chat or in the Q&A.
Okay, well, great. Well, thank you all. Cam is here too. Cam, maybe we could say hello to you. Cam is our BD person for the region. And if you do need something, Cam is around. Looks like some participants raised their hand here, or
Well, let's see.
Looks like Eric Doherty. Eric, did you want to go ahead and ask the question?
hi, Eric.
Yeah, hey, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we
Yeah.
can hear you now, Eric.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks. And again, for everybody else, the chat does not work. You have to go and do the Q&A to ask a question. So that was my concern I was having. Hey, real quick, when it comes to a investment group, if you've got technology out of a university setting, what is the typical best route? If you are, let's say, I'm here in Atlanta. So let's say you're doing something with University of Georgia. Are you best to work with folks that are in and around, like a Truist or somebody else like that, that is obviously associated with the area? Or is it okay to go, you know, to California institution or Northeast institution? What's kind of your feedback on that?
Yeah, so the thing is, in a region, you might, if you have a tech transfer license, like how many investors are on your list right now is probably like, you know, a couple of dozen or maybe 40 or less. But you really need like 600 to 800. And so you're not going to find them in your region. That's why you've got to get out of your region. But you want to hit your region first, because you can drive there and you can meet everybody and you do the face-to-face. But you've got to get the global target list in order to be able to play the numbers game adroitly.
Yeah,
You start with.
I just want to add that, you know, it's pretty standard to have an investment in, a company that's associated with an institution that they're doing tech transfer out of it, that's no investor is going to say, oh, I'm not going to invest in you because you're associated with an institution outside of my region. They're fine with it, and they're, as long as you have the licensing agreement locked down with the institution, they're not going to care. They're only going to care that you've dotted your I's and crossed your T's as far as the legalities of the licensing agreement is done.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Any
I,
other?
I have to run, so Karen, you and Cam can pick it up.
Yeah, and it looks like Cam is answering the questions about getting a database. You can reach out. I think, Cam, did you put in your email? You can reach out to Cam. You can reach out to me. You can reach out to RESI at lifesciencenation.com. Any of these emails are just fine, and we will make sure that you get to the right person to get a demo scheduled, which will be with Cam, actually. But we would be more than happy to show you doing a search for you individually and seeing what we can come up with in terms of investors that are fit for you. And again, if you want any feedback, please reach out. We'd be more than happy to give you some feedback and let you know, based on our experience, what might help you get more investor traction.
All right. Well, if there are no more questions, I want to thank Karen and Cameron and Dennis, although he is not around anymore, for this time. And thank you all for attending. Wait, may have one more question. Very good.
Yes, we definitely have investors that are interested in software as a medical device. And for that sort of thing, it's generally we'd search as a digital health company, but that's definitely, we cover everything in that area. Anything that's healthcare related, we can find someone that's a fit for you.
Excellent. Any other last minute questions? If not, thank you very much, everybody. This has been a great session, and we will see you on March 25th.
Yes, thank you, everyone.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Jason. Bye-bye.
See you, Cameron.